White Knight is a talk show with published authors, writers, and content.
Just making it awkward for Erica to watch me dance.
Creative and technical sides of writing, as well as the industry surrounding it, from novels to screenplays to comics and more.
All this time I thought we had to
And
be
now,
quiet while you were
here's your
dancing.
host.
Well, we do, because it's the intro. We're talking over the intro. And here's the talking part of intro.
Welcome to Right Night. We'll get to the topic and discussion in just a moment. For those listening to the podcast, we record the podcast on our live stream at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk, and we have a live interactive chat audience. You might hear the sound of the bell ding, and that means I want to interrupt somebody to read a comment or question. For those on the live stream, we won't read off everything you put in chat, but we'll try to get to the most relevant, the most amusing, or some combination of the both. Now, while we introduce ourselves, go and let us know what you're reading, writing, or creating tonight.
And while all of you put that in the chat, I'll let you know I am Travis I. Sivart, and our topic tonight will be female-led fantasy, though have no doubt we're going into sci-fi and other places. But in that spirit, I will point at my Portal series and Silver and Smith, which both have female main characters in them, and that I just had so much fun with. Now, let's see here. We've got two great co-hosts here tonight, both who have experience in fantasy and or sci-fi. So, Erica, why don't you start with your introduction and then pass it over to Tara when you're done.
Hi, my name is Erica Drayton. I go by the author name of E.L. Drayton, and I've got a couple of fantasy books under my belt. I'm working on a brand new series right now called the Son of River series that will be hopefully coming out summer of 2022. And if you follow me on my Twitter or Instagram at Erica Drayton, you'll get updates, or go to my website. I am posting all of my world building on there. I'm actually posting my Vomit Draft chapters on there, patrons only though. So if you want to get a peek at what the process looks like for an indie author from beginning to end, you can go check that out. Tara?
Hey, I am Tara Moeller. I am Dreamer-in-Chief at Dreampunk Press, a small indie collective that publishes...
The Plague! That's what it publishes!
God, it's COVID. No, fully vaccinated, and 2 weeks was yesterday. I'm sorry.
For those of you listening to podcasts, that might have actually been quite a while ago, not just 2 weeks yesterday. Are you done dying?
Yeah,
Can you go on?
I'm a published author. I've written sci-fi, fantasy. Most of my fantasy is for middle grade, written as T.L. Fry, which is my maiden name. But I have Placebo, which is a sci-fi novel under my actual name.
I like how you just whispered my maiden name. Like it's a dirty secret. Dirty secret. Well, I'm excited to have both of you here, and I've been really looking forward to this topic because, now, here's something I'm going to say. Female-led fantasy is different from female-written fantasy or sci-fi. And frankly, I need new authors, so I'm hoping I get a good list, especially if there's audiobooks, because I have long drives. Because looking down my reading list, I don't have a lot of female written audiobooks. And hold on, my cat is scratching at a door to get in. Sorry about that. So, do you want to talk about what you guys have been writing, or maybe other authors that you just adore that do this, of whatever, male, female, or other?
I will start because I will be the least helpful for you. Simply because...
Well, you could talk about your stuff. That's good too.
Right. I mean, yes, but it's they're not female led. And I hesitate a lot to go there. I have attempted. Every time I start a story and I have an idea, I always will throw in, okay, what if the main character was a girl? Okay? And I always come back to I don't know. I just feel weird about it. And so I'm like, I can't, I'm not ready yet. There is something that's preventing me from finding the female character. Now, I will put strong female characters in my work, and a lot of them will be some of my favorite, i.e., the story I'm writing right now. My villain is a female badass, okay? And I also have my main character, his sister, who unfortunately, spoiler alert, is assassinated by the villain. But she is also very strong. And the reason why she must be assassinated is because if she's not, then she will take the place as the leader of the tribe, which the villain currently is at this moment. And so she has to stop her by killing her.
Now,
Um,
we were talking about this series earlier, and don't you have a whole female dominant culture in this series?
I do, but my main character is a boy.
Okay.
And why did I do that? I did it because to me there was no story if I was seeing it from the point of view of a woman being in a female dominated world. I needed to put a boy in there who had a father who was taken from him before the age of 1, and so he is meant to live in his father's footsteps and follow in the ways of his father, who he never actually saw. So how could he emulate that? Who does he want to emulate? The person in his life who he has seen for 15 years, and that's his mother. And so he has to live with the fact that in their tradition, he is meant to learn the ways of the men in their tribe. And so he sneaks off to watch his mother practice fighting because she's a warrior. And he can't. I mean, the second chapter is Women Are Warriors, Men Are Not. That's the title of the second chapter. He has to come to these terms, and then he's faced with losing all of his family members in succession, and then he has to flee. And when he runs away, he gets kidnapped by the other tribe, where his eyes are just like, whoa, you have men who are elders, like, who actually pass down laws? You have men who are warriors and hunters here? Like, what's going on? I didn't know this was a thing. You know what I mean? And so it, to me, as I was thinking of the story, while yes, I do have women who are the rulers and the leaders and all the things over here, the only way I could show the juxtaposition from one tribe to the other is if I put in a character who wanted to be an other,
Right.
and was told you cannot.
That's
Because I was gonna make it from the point of view of his sister, and then as I was plotting it out, I killed her. So I was like, well then, because it only worked if the villain did the utmost villainous thing and killed her biggest rival.
Right.
And so it was when that happened, when I put a scene that her brother saw this, when I was kind of like, oh my God, I just wrote the Simba scene in The Lion King here, because, you know, he thinks that he's the reason why his sister was assassinated. And, you know, the Scar character comes in and says, run away and never return. And that's literally what he does. He runs away. It's called River Run for a reason, because River, son of River, has to run away into the other tribe. But anyway, not to go all the way into the details, but every time I write a story, I honestly, truthfully, I always say, okay, I'm going to start this from a female. I've got women littered throughout the story. I know it. Let's start there and see where we land. And I always end up not picking the female. I mean, in the first book I ever wrote that I published was Daxton.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, it was supposed to be from the point of view of the female pirate. She's a female badass pirate, okay, for the Fifth Compass series. It was going to be from her point of view. And then what happened? I gave her a child who she had to give up. Otherwise, her worst enemies, if they found out that she has a child, will try to kidnap him or kill him in order to stop her from being this badass pirate and messing with them. So she has to send him away. And so I ended up saying, my God, the story is not from the point of view of Silverblade, the badass pirate. It's from the point of view of her son, who's now 18, and his parents tell him, "We found you on our doorstep." And he goes on a journey to find his mother, only to realize the woman he hates and is actively trying to kill because he has a deep-seated hatred for the badass female pirate is his mother.
So what about you,
It's-
Tara? For female-led fantasy?
So the Magic and Dragon series, my middle grade,
Mm-hmm.
is girl. It's a female. Well, in a female body anyway, I guess I should say. I don't know that she comes across as very female. She does have an ambiguous name, and yes, I picked that on purpose, because she masquerades around. She's royalty, doesn't know it at the beginning of the series, learns it in the middle, or yeah, in the middle of the first book, and has to defeat her uncle who has taken over using magic. Befriends a dragon who's actually a boy. And in the second book, she also parades around, in disguise as a peasant. Female led. Female, I understand anyway.
I'm going to
I-
read a
I-
quick comment that maybe you can give us. Perhaps you have some authors that you read who write female-led, or just like Erica, a female that writes fantasy, even if it is, male main characters. We can still look at it from that direction. But John says the lead in our novel is a woman. It wasn't a conscious thought. Do others find it easier for this to occur in fantasy or sci-fi? What do you guys think? Is it easier to put a woman in a lead role in sci-fi over fantasy, or the other way around, or?
I think it's easier to put a woman in the lead for sci-fi, and I'll tell you why. Because I do have, way in the deep recesses of my trash bin of ideas, a sci-fi series, and my sci-fi series is female led. And I think for me, again, when I think about write what you know, or write what you've read or what you've seen,
Mm-hmm.
when I think of sci-fi, I think of I'm a Trekkie,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And so when I think of sci-fi and I think of who's my favorite captain, oh, Captain Janeway, all the way.
Nice.
Female led, female strong. You know what I mean? And when I
Yeah.
think of who my favorite sci-fi characters are, I don't know. I mean, I think of Aliens, and I think of, Sigourney Weaver in the
Yeah.
Aliens movies. And, and so I think for whatever reason, in a lot of sci-fi, it's strangely acceptable to have a scantily clad, let's admit that part, okay, form figured fitting female, looking sweaty and having just battled and being very stern and strong and commandeering. Whereas for some reason, fantasy, it's always the damsel in distress.
You
It's
know,
always the girl in the tower. It's always the princess who needs the man to come and kiss her and wake her up.
with sci-fi, I wonder if that's because, in theory, in sci-fi, it's an advanced culture, advanced technology, so perhaps we've advanced enough that there's better balanced equality between the genders, and also
Yeah, but how is it that we allow it in one and not the other?
I'm-
It's all being
I'm-
written in the same space and time.
I'm getting to that there. Give me just a moment here. And beyond that, you also have technology. So, for example, wielding an 8 to 12 pound sword for a battle feels different in people's mind than shooting a gun. It's, or the advanced martial arts fight scenes if you're going hand to hand versus heavy, literally heavy metal. So maybe that's why we look at it easier in sci-fi than fantasy, because the fights are different and the culture is different. We think older, less advanced and equality-based cultures in the fantasy past versus the sci-fi future. What do you guys think? Bullshit or not? Tara?
I mean, in my middle grade fantasy,
Uh-huh.
Allie saves the dragon
Okay.
in the first book, and in the second book, they're off and they save what at first appears to be a damsel in distress from a dragon. And then this damsel, you know, while very feminine, Chantel is very feminine in here. Um, Quickly disavows all of that by, no, we have to go save the dragon. Um, so, but I think when I wrote that, because it's middle grade, and I went against the trope on purpose, which is the damsel in distress,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're saving the damsels from the dragons. And in both cases, one isn't really a dragon. In the second book, there's a real dragon, but again, they're saving the dragon from the villain in it. So I'm not sure why, because I have two characters. One, Allie is definitely a tomboy. Someone who is far more comfortable in tunic and tights than in her gowns,
Mm-hmm.
saving the day. And then we have Chantel, who she's not sure she's going to like at first in the second book, and then they become quite good friends, who is very feminine, very comfortable in her gowns, and yet also very strong, and who was in the process of saving herself from this villain, her and the dragon, from this villain, got a little bit swept away in a river where they saved her from, but they weren't saving, she was in the process of saving herself. So I think for a lot, it's traditionally males have been writing fantasy, and that
Mm-hmm.
is their fantasy, the damsel in distress.
But a lot of females are
I
writing that
I
same.
grew up reading Anne McCaffrey, and there was never a damsel in distress there. Piers Anthony, where whatever the heck, I loved it, but it was all over the place.
It's true.
Um,
And by the way, two of the
um,
authors that I was raised on. Tara, finish your thought. Pass it over to Erica.
I think in some ways it's because it's what is expected. I mean, you've got the Game of Thrones with all of its problems. Um, and I think it's you stick with what's comfortable instead of, but I think if you can have fun going against that.
Erica?
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot when we talk about writing to market is who specifically the market is. Because a lot of times when people are trying to make the argument of why there are very few female-led fantasy books, whether it's a woman writing it or a man writing it, is the argument will be, well, more men are buying fantasy books. And so if you want to turn off the funnel of buyers, you would write a female-led fantasy. But if you want to make sure that you're making those sales, and you know that 80% of the people buying fantasy are men, then you give them what they want, right? And I don't know if the same argument can be said of sci-fi, because I'm not too familiar with what the real numbers are, and are the numbers of male to female readers in the fantasy world really the same when you include something like YA? And we know that there's a higher percentage of women who read YA, and so yes, there could be female-led fantasy in that pocket, but I think that also, when you talk about writing to market, people assume the market is men. So
something
And
that
what-
happened in the 80s when video game systems came out. Nintendo, Atari, they decided to market this towards young boys. And they marketed towards young boys. So young boys gravitated to video games because that's what you do when you see commercials representing yourself, you're like, that's my thing. And for decades, they missed out on a huge female audience because they did that. And there is a chance that fantasy and sci-fi has done the same thing. Now, tangent in a different direction, something I did, the very first book that Tara edited for me was Harbinger, book 1 of the Downfall series. And in that, I have 5 main characters, juggle them around. But after I wrote it, I had 4 males and 1 female. And I looked at that, I'm like, I don't like that. And I took one of the characters whose name is Grudo, so a very odd name, kind of, they were a street rat. And I went through and I changed Grudo's from a male to a female through the whole book without changing a single other thing. So I didn't gender specify anything. Because so many people have complained, well, when men write women, they write women just so far over this way. And I'm like, what if I took somebody I wrote as just a character in this adventure story, and instead of it male, female, and don't change anything else, because there's no sex, there's no romance in these books, so I didn't feel the need to change anything else. And I'm hoping for fantasy's sake that stands up, because now we have 1 strong female character, and then Grudo, who is actually kind of wily and crafty and kind of out for the gold as opposed to out for being a hero. By the way, let's see here. Raven says, I've been buying fantasy paperbacks since the 90s. John says, our stores get surveys which show us the demographics of readers. Graphic novels have grown immensely with women. So maybe we can go back to that other topic of, do you think we don't have as many women reading fantasy and sci-fi because it's been marketed towards men instead of women? Or both?
Probably. And I think until that paradigm shifts,
Mm-hmm.
will we see that rude awakening of all, because I'm sure there's so many young girls out there and so many women out there who have that fantasy novel that they wrote it and no
Right.
one will ever see it. And it's because they feel deep down, no, who's gonna buy this? No one, no man's gonna buy this, and women don't buy it.
Do you think
So,
anime could lead the way into that? Manga and anime, do you think that could lead the way into that? Because I know
I don't know if
Okay.
is that the same audience? Because I feel like
No.
anime is a very age-specific audience, and fantasy is supposed to be one of those things where it crosses decades of, you could be 60 or you could be 20, and you're both reading Game of Thrones. Whereas I don't know if that's the same case with anime. Because
See,
I know for me personally, I don't like anime TV series. I will watch anime movies.
I'm
Certain
kind of
types,
kind of
but
in the same boat with you here, and now I'm going over to my head, and I was thinking, well, anime has a lot of female-led, and then it seems like anime is one extreme or the other. You got them in mini skirts, going,
Right.
and superpowers,
right, and the big
or
boobs and stuff, and
right.
It's, ugh.
So, and Tara, I'm thinking maybe out of all 3 of us, and I know you're not necessarily a huge anime manga fan, but I think you've had more exposure because of Mo. What do you think?
So when we talk and we say, anime and manga,
Right?
we talk about it like it's YA, like it's a genre, whereas there are different genres
Right.
within anime. And that's what again, and it runs the gamut because anime and manga are mediums. They're like book versus ebook versus movie versus graphic
Right.
novel. So there are, they run the whole gamut. There's fantasy ones, there's high school
Sci-fi,
ones.
right.
There's sci-fi ones. There's
Hentai.
the equivalent of what would be hero. So, and again, and they all run the gamut.
Right.
I don't particularly like the ones that have the females in the little short skirts and the
Right.
big busts.
So what about the other
I
ones
mean,
with
my
badass
favorite one
females?
is Yuri on Ice, which is about guys and figure skating. So, um, and then Squid Girl.
So is
So,
Squid Girl one of the good female badass led somethings?
okay, well, it's female led. Squid Girl is, well, she's a
Sh-
squid.
Well, I'm
Um,
loving the concept just from
but
the
I
name,
love
but
it because it's about saving the it's a lot about saving the planet, etc. It's
okay, we've got to recover here, folks. We've
but
got to
anyway,
bring this back. Female-led fantasy or sci-fi. We're coming up short, is what I'm hearing. We're running into a wall here where we're like, well, it's out there.
I feel like it's very niche. So you need to know someone who knows that female writer, and then you have to go search for them on Amazon and then buy that book. I mean, unless they're going to be like a Robin Hobb or something where they might be at the same level of a Brandon Sanderson, and even in her case, she's far below him, I would say. But I'm
Sales, yeah.
struggling to name even the top five publisher writers who may even still be living, because a lot of the greats, when they talk about female writers of fantasy and sci-fi, are probably now deceased, like uh uh all the other fantasy writers. But the ones that I know, I'm thinking of like indie authors. I'm currently right now trying to pull them together and trying to make some sort of database of some way, shape, or form of where are the female writers? Are they hiding behind their initials, which a lot of them are? Are they hiding behind that cryptic cover? Yes, a lot of them are. And so you would really need to dig deep to find the ones who are female led and to find the ones who are female written, because they don't want to shine a light on the fact that they're a woman or the fact that the book has a female lead, because they want to get the book reviews and they want to make the sales.
I think if you're talking traditional publishing, if you're a female author and you submit, I mean, because I've had that, because I've submitted to agents before I decided to do it on my own. Is this a romance?
Right. You
No,
get
it's
pigeonholed
not.
right away. Right away.
Women are, with traditional publishing, women are expected to write romance. Now, within romance, they will write fantasy, they will write sci-fi, they will write hardcore detective novels, they will write, but it is all under this umbrella of fantasy or of romance.
Okay.
And so that's like, in order to break in, you write a romance.
You have to sneak in.
I've got some.
Yeah. And that's where it is. And they're always a romance author.
I've got some. From my childhood, I read Ursula Le Guin, the Earthsea series. Anne McCaffrey was already mentioned. Anne Rice could be brought into this. We have some great female authors out there. Weiss and Hickman. I believe Tracy Weiss, male, Hickman, I forget her first name, I believe female. We have these folks out here. We've just forgot them, and there's not a big one. Mercedes Lackey. John mentions Mercedes Lackey, which is another great one. I read these in my teens. Where are they now? No, not these specifically. So,
yeah, I think the next generation of those writers are now being represented by a lot of the Black female writers. Like N.K. Jemisin is one that I'm thinking of, and there are so many more that are coming up. And I wonder, is it because they're Black or is it because their work is good? I can't speak to that because I haven't read anything anything by these authors. But I think, to speak to what you were saying, that women get in the door with romance for adult fiction, I think women fantasy writers also get in the door by writing young adult. And so they write those
It's fair.
fairy tale twist stories where, it's Snow White, but there's a twist to it. And so here's that young adult series, or it's The Wizard of Oz and that twist, or it's Sleeping Beauty with the twist. And I love them. I buy them up. I gobble them up, and they're 90% of them are written by women. And it's fantasy, and it's usually female led, usually very strong female led characters. But it lives in the young adult realm. So unless you're someone like me who's over the age of 35 and you've been reading young adult for the last 20 years, you're still living in that world, and so you're still buying young adult even though you're no longer considered a young adult. But that's who they're marketing it to. They're marketing it to the 15 to 21 year olds, and it just so happens that there's a pocket of older women who are buying this stuff because we were buying it then, and so we're still buying it now.
Not just
And
women.
it's not available in the adult aisles.
Yeah,
Right.
and not just women, but like myself, there's a point in time where I almost converted from fantasy to young adult because there was better stories there. They made more sense. They had more character. Because a lot of the older fantasy, and by older I don't mean from the 80s or 90s, I mean written by older, in general, males, I didn't care. It was a story.
They
It was
feel
a
very
nice world.
self-absorbed. I find that they're very self-absorbed, and they're writing it for them and less for their market, and so that's why they're like 2,000 pages long.
Well, I just didn't care about the characters. Now, we can talk about Robert Jordan, we can talk about George R. R. Martin, who has strong female characters, but it is definitely not female-led fantasy.
No.
If anything, maybe Robert Jordan by book six was hitting female equality fantasy, in that he had his girls over here doing this and his boys doing that, and they were equally important in the story. George R. R. Martin, because of the world he built, the females never led. They were ultimately important characters, absolutely, but in that society, they were second-class citizens. But
Wonder if a lot of the decision that happens here, does it need to come from the top down or from the bottom up? And by that I mean, should it be on the agents who are signing these people
It's a great
to
question.
take a stand and say, I'm going to start signing more women with female leads to present to the top five, or are we going to lay the blame at the feet of the top five publishers to say, why aren't you actively going out there seeking this? Because they could come back and say, well, we're not getting those presented to us. We speak to, the agents, and if the agents aren't bringing us the good word, I mean, we can only publish what we're
Let me
what we're
jump in
presented
real
with.
quick.
You know what I mean?
Because of our time, I'm going to make this our closing question, because I think we can go 10 minutes on this question alone without a problem. And for sake of brevity, I'm going to bully my way in and give my opinion first, because I know you guys will definitely give some good opinions and build up that rest of the time. By the way, Raven says, my hubby buys so much YA fantasy. Hubby is listening, says Robert Asprin has strong female characters, but he doesn't remember any that were female-led. Exactly. Agreed. Okay, so with this, we're calling out the gatekeepers. We're calling out the middle of the hourglass, going, hey, here's what I think. The gatekeepers are responding to pressure from above and pressure from below. So, here's where the pressure needs to come from above and below. We need a grassroots movement for, and by the way, Erica, you've complained about this, where you don't necessarily want to be, you don't want people to pick up your book and go, yay, she's black, she's gay, she's whatever. You want to be like, I wrote a damn good story, tell me I wrote a damn good story. And I want
Right.
that. I want to support, I want diversity, but frankly, if it's not a good book, I don't want to read it. I want a good story, first and foremost. So, that being said, from the grassroots movements, we need to support our newer authors or our older authors that are not well known and move them up by purchasing books. You know how people on the bottom get attention? By making sales. And then those agents and those big five and whoever else comes down and goes, oh, look, they're making money. We want their money. Let's go talk to them. And from above, whether it's letter writing campaigns, how many times have we seen internet movements with something being signed digitally to create this change? Let's look at that. Let's see what kind of, and again, Erica, quoting you earlier, you don't want to have to die on a hill for a cause. You want to write a book, not sit out here in the street. You believe in the cause. You support the cause. You will march for the cause. You will do what needs to. But that's not your passion. Your passion is to put a story down that people can enjoy. I'm with you on that. So, let's look at it from that. That's my say. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go last? And then we'll wrap it up. Somebody throw up a hand for first, or is Tara?
Okay. I think it's the problem is you have publishing houses that are basing what they're going to purchase on prior sales.
Right.
So they're going to agents, and agents are only going to sign the authors of manuscripts that they can sell, because that's how they get their money.
It's a feedback loop.
They don't get any money from the author. They get it from the publishing house that buys it to sell. So they're only going to sign what they think they can sell. The publishing houses are only going to buy what they think they can sell. And the problem is, if they're only selling one thing, and that's the only thing we can frickin' buy, then they're going to go, ooh, this is what sells. And I think the good thing is that with self-publishing and people being able to put out, like they say, write what you want to read.
Right.
Which is why YA and self-publishing YA is really kind of coming into the forefront, is because we're responding to what people actually want to read. Because if I want to read it, there's probably other folks that want to read it. And hopefully the big publishing houses will figure it out.
5 years too late, but they will. Go ahead, Erica.
A part of me has been fighting this. I refuse to conform to what the man wants.
Right.
Right.
I apologize for that. As the man.
you take ownership of that, and on behalf of the man.
Sure, why not? Let's do that. Go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
And so in ways I almost shot myself in the foot, because I said, I'm not going to do what is expected of me, which is to write that female, black, gay story. I'm going to do the opposite, and I refuse to let you pigeonhole me into saying that that's what I should write, because that is what I am.
Right.
But I think I've grown a lot since then. And I think at the end of the day, I really just need to tell the story. And if the story can be told from, the point of view of the white noble in the castle, or the poor boy living in a mountain, a member of a tribe, but it's the same story of struggle and survival, then, I will do that. And let me see what happens. Will this make the difference? Will the fact that I am stepping into what many might consider my truth, and going out there and writing a story of color, and a story of gender identity and discovery, and a story of, all of this, and will that be and make the difference for me? And if it does, I'll be like, well, I probably shouldn't have taken such a strong stance for the last 10 years to say I refuse to do that thing.
May I hear? No, I don't think. Don't worry about that past 10 years, because 20 years from now, you've expressed you're somewhere in your mid-30s. 20 years from now, when you're between Tara's and my age, because she's like, I don't know, 90 or something, and I'm 18. I don't. The bottom line is, you've got a lot of time. You've got time to not just grow yourself, but possibly more important, to grow your stories. And if this is what you're passionate about, don't do what you are expected to do. Do what you got. What you want to do, damn it. You can do what you want to do. And if I can
Right.
read a
And that's my goal, and I have no interest in being like a hybrid author or a traditional author by any means. I'm sticking with the self-publishing route. I've thought long and hard about that. Will that change 10 years from now? I don't know. But for right now, I like having the control, and I like not having to have an agent who I may
yeah.
get, to sign me because of that one book, and then I say, "Well, I've got this idea." And they say, "Well, there's some issues with that one. Maybe we should table that and try to stick to what I know will sell for you, and or maybe you should change that character to be this way because I can market that." You know what I mean? So I don't want that level of giving up that level of freedom. And I enjoy writing, and I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm going to hate what I love doing. And so I'm just gonna, stick to this. I'm gonna ride this train, and I'm gonna see where this train takes me because it's very different from what I've ever done in the last, 10 years of writing. And I will be able to be the test subject and say, "Ha ha! It turns out writing from a place of who you are and what you are actually is not a bad idea."
Now, Raven says in the chat comments, this is exactly why I almost exclusively read indie authors. The publishing companies will be forced to acknowledge what we want to buy as readers. They will have no choice but to accept that a good writer can be any race, gender identity, age, or sexual orientation. They'll have to follow the money. Our money. And John of Conquest Publishing adds to support what you were saying there, Erica. When they try to table things, pick up the table and hit them with it. So I think this was a great wrap up. I don't want to wrap it up yet, though, but we got a couple minutes and we've hit our deadline. Does anybody have something so urgent they have to say it right now, or shall we say goodnight and head out? Tell us
good.
goodnight, folks.
Night, folks.
Okay, and we're out. Give me a second.
Before we go, I want to remind everyone that you can email us at rightnightshow@gmail.com. That's right with the W, night with an N, show@gmail.com. To let us know your thoughts on the show's topic, suggest other topics you'd like to hear us discuss, or just have a message read out on air to someone in your life. Thanks to everyone for supporting the show by downloading the podcast, sharing it on social media, grabbing some shirt stickers and mugs from bit.ly/tavern merch, or barware patches and hats from bit.ly/tavern merch too. That's bit.ly/tavern merch or tavern merch followed by the number 2. Thanks to everyone who joined us live at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk, and everyone who supports the tavern by subscribing, hosting, throwing bits, raids, and most of all, commenting.
Thank you for joining author Travis I. Sivart and the other writers, content creators, and all-around amazing people for our discussion here on Right. Join us again soon, and until you do, make sure you create with passion, enjoy the journey, and remember, every night can be right.